First, thank you for showing up to this impromptu spaces. As often happens, these are, created on the spur of the moment because something has pissed me off. And so here we go. Get ready for the latest installment. Before I do that, let me just mention a few things. Number one, I just returned yesterday from a 10-day trip to Alaska. It was 10 days. I mean, it was a cruise with Northwood University. I was the featured speaker at one of their events, and there were several other events that happened on the cruise. It was my first time in Alaska, beautiful state. It did take us 55 plus hours to return to Montreal. Number one, because we had to wait for 17 hours for our flight out of Juneau. But then that flight was delayed, which meant that our flight from Seattle to Montreal we missed it. We had to wait 24 hours for the next one. Bottom line, it ended up taking 55 plus hours to return from Juneau. I could have gone to Australia and back in the time that it took me to come home from Alaska. But otherwise, it was a great trip. I did want to mention very quickly, because it'll be relevant to today's discussion, something that happened during my trip to Alaska. We stopped at Sitka, which is a town that at one point was owned by Russia, and then the U.S. government bought it over. And we started walking around. We ended up at this store that, part art, part jewelry. Started chatting to the folks in there. And then it turns out that the owner of the place is a fourth generation Alaskan, but originally of Palestinian descent. When he found out that we were from the Middle East, we started speaking in Arabic and so on. And then he found out that my wife had her eyes on a ring, a pretty expensive ring. I mean, it wasn't a $30 ring. And so after we had chatted for a while, he comes up to us and says, "I'd like to offer, if you don't mind, this ring to your wife." This is a man that we just met, that we're very unlikely to meet again because he lives in Sitka. We live in Canada. And yet the sense of generosity, of hospitality was such, the sense of universal brotherhood and friendship was such that he did an outlandishly kind and generous act. I kept saying that, sorry, we can't accept this, it's too much, so on. And as often happens in the Middle East, he refused to accept our no's. And then at one point I said, well, I will not rest until I find a way to reciprocate your incredible gesture of generosity and kindness. And he looks at me and says, well, the only thing that you need to reciprocate is for me to have your friendship. Now, I tell that story, which I'm probably going to release on my YouTube channel and podcast as a separate piece. I tell that story because maybe he would have reacted differently if he knew that I was Jewish, but I didn't get that sense from him. By the way, I thought that he was maybe Palestinian Christian. But my sense is that when two people come into an interaction, judging one another as individuals, judging them by the totality of their merits and flaws, that's where you have the most enriching experiences. At that point, I'm just a guy who seemed like a nice guy with a nice wife. He's a lovely, generous guy. We connected in the most intimate of ways via a ethos of shared universal brotherhood. And that's it. Now, of course, it helps that Arabic is my mother tongue and that I'm from this region, so we could connect in that way and so on. But my point is, I'd like to think that even if he knew that I was Jewish, it wouldn't change in the least bit his affection for me. And I didn't care that he's Palestinian or not. By the way, just for you to remember, it's Palestinians who stole our home in Lebanon. It's Palestinians who were harassing my eldest brother, forcing him to leave Lebanon and move to Montreal before the Civil War started. It's PLO, who paradoxically both were part of the destruction of Lebanon, but it was also PLO militia who were hired to protect us as they drove us to the Beirut International Airport. So there's also, it was Palestinians, it was Fatah that kidnapped and tortured my parents. And yet I don't hold ill will to Palestinians in general, because that gentleman who is of Palestinian descent, who's been for 4 generations in Alaska, has nothing to do with the realities that I and my family faced in Lebanon, right? And so we were able to connect in this truly magical way. And I still am in awe at such generosity and kindness on his part. And my wife wears the ring very proudly. And that happened because there was no Jew, there was no Muslim, there was no Christian. There was just 2 guys that come from a shared background, in this case that we both speak Arabic, and we connected. We were both warm, fun individuals. So now I would like to, having given that story, that, by the way, that's the only way that you're going to have future peace in the world. And unfortunately, I don't think that will happen, because tribalism and coalitional psychology is an inherent part of the architecture of the human mind. And certainly the Abrahamic religions play up on that in terms of coalition psychology. And certainly no one plays that up with greater division than Islam. And so you're not going to get peace when a religion preaches that it must, as its most fundamental canonical goal, imperialize, colonize, and convert every single individual on earth. That's a fact. There are 73,000 things I can share with you that supports that, but I don't have to share 73,000 facts. We have 1,400 years of history. We have the canons of the religion that repeatedly stated. So having said that, I want to come to a tweet that I posted yesterday, and then the reaction to that tweet, and then that will send us off on a discussion of why the West, in my view, will probably not recover from what's happening. So here's the tweet that I posted yesterday. It's close to 1 million views in just a few hours. So this is, I'm gonna read my exact post. It was so, and I'm going to spell the various spellings of Muhammad, because that's part of my infinite satire. It was so enriching returning to Montreal today. Our border security officer, Muhammad, Mohhammad, was sweet and polite. Our taxi queue manager, Muhammad, Mohammed, was lovely. Our taxi driver, Muhammad, Muhammad, was upbeat and professional. I found the kiosk owner, Muhammad, only 1 M, a bit rude, but his co-owner, Mahmoud, was affable. Quebec is going to make it. Bright future ahead. Thank you, François Legault, for protecting our French heritage. François Legault is the current Premier of Quebec, who's very, very keen on protecting French identity. So as you can see, diversity is indeed our strength. The diversity applies to the multiplicity of ways by which you could spell Muhammad. That's really the kind of diversity that we're going for in our immigration policy. Are you there? Yeah. Okay, you're still here. Can I just get a thumbs up from somebody that you're all still there? I think we should be fine. Yeah, okay. This is good. Thumbs up from somebody? Yes? All right, so thank you for the thumbs up. So I put up this tweet, and of course, hundreds of thousands of people agreed with it and understood it, but of course, others did not understand it and appreciate it. Let me share a few of those with you. So many people wrote, What a piece of shit you are, Gad Saad. Is Gad Saad a French-Canadian name? And so, of course, I've got a whole section in Suicidal Empathy, my forthcoming book, where I exactly address that. Categorization theory is a cognitive mechanism that explains how human minds have evolved to categorize things properly. So, for example, the wild lion is a feline. Your house cat is a feline. They're both felines, yet I recognize that when I categorize them at the right level, they are distinguishable from each other. This is why I cuddle with my house cat. I don't actually, I'm allergic to cats, but I'm using the example. But I don't cuddle with the wild lion because I have this thing called a brain that has allowed me to properly categorize things. Here's another example. If there are knife attacks that are on the increase in a country, knives are cutlery and spoons are cutlery. The fact that they're both within the supra category called cutlery doesn't mean that they are indistinguishable because they are both cutlery. Therefore, we should ban both spoons and knives when we get on a plane, because we recognize that it's at the right level of categorization that the policy has to happen. So yes, Gad Saad is an Arabic and Jewish name, and yes, Gad Saad, I am pointing to the guttural sound of the ayin. Yes, Gad Saad is from the Middle East, but Gad Saad is different from Muhammad in that we have data that supports that Gad Saad fights for the values that define the West. So even though Gad Saad is from the Middle East and is an immigrant, that doesn't make him indistinguishable from Muhammad, who just came back from a summer camp of Al-Qaeda. But yet thousands of people wrote to me and said, you are such a hypocrite because you yourself are not a Quebecer. So that's number one. How could you ever address the problem when thousands of people could be succumbing to such a bafflingly idiotic categorization error? Number one. Number two, I had a lot of lovely Quebecers who wrote to me. Now remember, I am basically arguing that Quebec is being subsumed under a tidal wave of Islam. What did the Quebecers respond to me? They weren't upset by the fact that all of the schools now, in French-speaking schools, the number one pupil is called Muhammad. They were upset that my tweet was posted in English. Did you hear that? The real danger to Quebec society is not the... By the way, I'm fully francophone. I learned French before I did learn English. I consider French almost a co-mother tongue of mine. But because I expressed myself in English, and since the number one goal of Quebec society is to protect the French language from being subsumed under the really mean English language, it wasn't the Muhammads that were the problem. It's the guy warning about the Muhammads and doing it in English. There's your suicidal death. There is your collective seppuku. Seppuku, a term that I introduced in Suicidal Empathy. So let me just knock those out because I have a little list here for you. Now, when I posted the message about all the different Muhammads, here is what, you ready? Here is what Muhammad Mu'us Hassan wrote to me. I want to read you the tweet, and actually it was posted on my Facebook. And I want you to tell me If there is anything more clear than this perfect message from Muhammad, his name is Muhammad, he's responding to my satirical tweet about the Muhammads. So now I'm reading him. What a sad and desperate tweet. Keep crying, genocidal professor. Islam is now the fastest growing religion in the world. Millions of people around the world embrace it every single month, and it will eventually rule not just America and Europe, but the entire globe. After London, a youthful Muslim politician is going to lead America's biggest and most important city, New York City. What can you learn from that? No one can stop Islam from spreading everywhere and helping humanity to know the real God and worship Him alone. Unlike the followers of other faiths, we Muslims have a unique mission to struggle and fight for God's rule to govern every aspect of our lives and convince others to follow suit. It's very painful to see you abandoning your entire career in marketing, psychology, and neuroscience to focus only on fighting Islam and mocking his beautiful and unique teachings. Relax, you will soon go. Islam will remain stronger and it will enter every house in North America, Europe, and beyond. Keep crying. It is almost impossible to imagine a more fitting engagement. I wrote a tweet where I was expressing the extent to which the demographic realities of Montreal have changed, which are the exact same demographic realities in Sweden, in Denmark, in Norway, in Italy, in Spain, in France, in Britain, and not a single shot had to be fired. You only had to have the West parasitized by idea pathogens, hence the parasitic mind, and then to have their emotional systems parasitized and hijacked by suicidal empathy. Nothing could be more noble than giving up your society, your heritage, your religion, your women, your culture, your children at the altar of infinite compassion and empathy. That's what the West has done. And so I received many emails from people in the West saying, "What a piece of shit you are. My friend Ahmad is a lovely guy. He mans the local store and he's never hurt anybody." Aha, there you go. I'm a mean person. So when myself and my parents had to escape execution in Lebanon due to Islam, that was just a manifestation of not true Islam. When my parents were kidnapped and tortured by Fatah, that was not true Islam. When my wife's family had to escape Lebanon, that was not true Islam. When my wife's ancestors had to escape the Armenian genocide at the hand of the Ottomans, that was not true Islam. When my grandparents from Syria had to escape Syrian Jew hatred, that was not true Islam. When my brother-in-law's family had to escape Alexandria, Egypt in the 50s because they were going to be exterminated, that was not true Islam. When in the past 1400 years, hundreds of millions of people have been killed, subjugated by Islam in 56 plus countries that are now Islamic majority, if not solely Islamic, that was not true Islam. When today we have the horrifying erasure of the Druze and the Syrian Christians in Syria with thousands of videos being shared, that's not true Islam. As a matter of fact, I received many messages saying that it was the Jews that placed this guy as head of Syria, because it's the Jews who created Al-Qaeda, and he was part of Al-Qaeda, and therefore it is really the Jews who are killing the Syrian Druze. When I post messages imploring people to defend the Middle Eastern Christians. I receive hate from thousands of posts with Christ is King telling me about how the IDF bombed a church in Gaza. Do you know how many Christians live in Gaza today? Why is that? It's the fault of the Jews? The IDF, when they hit that church, is it because they were trying to erase Christianity in Gaza? So when I share endless posts imploring for people to rise up because the Christians are being erased from the Middle East, you would think that Christians in the United States would be saying, thank you, Dr. Saad, for using your platform to defend our fellow co-religionists. Thank you, Dr. Saad, for taking on the death threats because you are trying to defend people who are not even of your religion. But the message that I receive is, fuck you, Dr. Saad. Your people, by the way, I'm not Israeli, bombed a Gazan church. How can you win a war when that's what people are doing? So today my wife saw me and said, you seem really angry today. I said, I get up every day trying to do the right thing. What's the right thing? I want to defend the West from the shithole that I escaped. The one that Ayan Hirsi Ali escaped from. The one that Yasmin Muhammad escaped from. The one that Mossab, the former son of Hamas, escaped from. Because we lived in those societies. So I get up every day with zero hatred in my heart. I get up every day saying, please wake up. That doesn't mean that 2 billion Muslims are bad people. But it does mean that when Islam becomes a majority, the rights of the others disappear. There is data for that. Wake up. 1400 years. Muslim extremists, Muslim theorists, Gaddafi, the former head of Libya, endless imams, Yusuf al-Qaradawi, the head of Sunni Islam who recently passed away, explained to the world, we are going to conquer the West, not militarily. We cannot do it militarily. We're going to conquer the West in 3 ways. Through the womb of our women, right? Through demography. We outbreed the asshole non-Muslims. We will conquer the West through hijrah, by immigration. And we will conquer the West by using your miserable freedoms against you. It's written. It's taped. It's there for you. The FBI has the memoranda. I can send you the clips where that's being said. But no, the real problem is Zionism. Zionism is the quest for Jews to have a homeland. It's not expansionist. Israel gave back the Sinai, which would have increased the size of Israel 100-fold, because they said, in return for giving you back the Sinai, which we won when you attacked to exterminate us, we just want Egypt to sign a peace treaty with us. They've given back tons of land in wars where the Arabs had attacked Israel because they just want that small sliver of land that's the size of New Jersey. But Islam cannot tolerate that. Muhammad said, promise on his deathbed, promise me that you will rid Arabia of the Jews and the Christians, and that Allah's religion will be the only one. All right, let me keep going. Hold on a second. There are 57 Islamic countries. Well, there's 56 Islamic countries, and one is the Palestinian territories. They are part of the OIC, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. Each one of those 56 countries one day started with zero Islam. Today, most of those countries are exclusively Islam. How did that happen? What's the mechanism that led to that? What is it going to take for you to wake up? Does that mean that all Muslims are evil? Of course not. But they're not evil despite of Islam. They're not evil because they're kind, normal human beings. There are mean, disgusting Jews, and there are nice Jews. There are mean Muslims and nice Muslims. But does Islam as an ideology promote personal freedoms and liberties? Well, nothing could be clearer. No. Just crack open the canons of Islam. Crack open history books. So then, let me go on. Okay, 56. Islam has a duality principle, which again I've explained on numerous occasions, but I'm taking this opportunity to explain again. There is Dar al-Islam and Dar al-Harb. Dar is the house of, the salon of. Dar al-Islam means the house of Islam. Dar al-Harb, Harb in Arabic, is the house of war. Any land that has never been conquered by Islam is canonically under the house of war, meaning we are in perpetual existential war against all lands that have yet to be conquered by Islam. Any land that has ever been under the dominion of Islam and that Islam loses has to be won again by Islam. This is why Israel cannot exist. Because even though Jews have existed in that land for thousands of years, because before Islam ever existed in that land, once there was a time period where Islam was majority in that land, even though there's never been a Palestinian state, there's been a Palestine that has been under dominion of different parties. The British Mandate, the Ottoman Mandate, and you can go back throughout history all the way back to the Romans that gave that name. But there's never been a Palestinian nation. There's never been a Palestinian people. There's been Jordanians, there's been Egyptians, there's been all sorts of Arabs. There's never been a Palestinian nation. That's a concoction from the 1960s with Yasser Arafat. Okay? There is a thing called reality that you could follow. But the Jews can't exist there for the same reason that Zoroastrians can't exist there. For the Bahia can't exist there. For animists can't exist there. For atheists can't exist there. For Christians can't exist there. For Hindus can't exist there. For Shintoism can't exist there. For Jainism can't exist there. Every place where Islam has borders with someone else, there is a conflict. Am I making that stuff up or is it real? Now, the fact that minorities have existed at various points under Islamic rule doesn't prove the point that you're thinking it proves. Someone walks around with diabetes, but then one day there's a tipping point where they die from diabetes. That doesn't mean that all the years that they lived with diabetes was not something that was detrimental to their health, but you have to get to a tipping point before diabetes takes its ultimate manifestation. Right? Shingles exists within us as a dormant virus, and then it breaks out. So yes, we lived in Lebanon without being executed until we had to wear very good running shoes and outrun those who were going to decapitate us. And that's the history of the past 1400 years. So if Islam now is X% in the West, do you think that if it doubles, there will be more freedoms for Christians or less freedoms? Do you think there will be more liberties for women or less? Do you think that Jews will be safer or less safe? Life is about statistical regularities. Do we have any statistical inferential reasoning that allows us to predict what happens? For example, all over Europe, there's been an astounding increase in sexual assaults on host women. We have all the data that suggests who the massively overrepresented people are amongst the sexual assaulters. Is it bigoted to share that information, or is it called reality? Now again, the number one predictor of child abuse in a home is if there is a step parent. It's 100-fold greater predictor than the next biggest predictor. That statement holds true even though most step parents don't abuse their children. Do you fucking understand what statistical reasoning is? Therefore, there could be 500 million Muslims who are perfectly lovely, and that statement does not negate the fact that Islam is not consistent with American liberties and freedoms. All right, let's keep going. There have been 47,000 plus terror attacks committed by Islamic terrorists since 9/11 alone in 70 countries. Does that data in any way shape your thinking? Or is it that you know Ahmad, who's a gay man who's married to a Jewish guy who eats prosciutto and drinks vodka, therefore he is the true representation of Islam? I don't believe that the West can come out of this because Islam is already fully in the West. And there is no turning back. You can't fix a problem if your highest virtue is to ignore the problem. So here's an example. I've already mentioned this a million times to you. When I posted the names of the people who were the perpetrators of the gang rapes of young British white girls, conservative estimates puts the number of victims at 250,000. Almost exclusively, it's been Asian men. Asian. Oh, really? They were Japanese, the rapists? Oh, they were Chinese, the rapists. Oh, they were from, where were they? Oh, they're Asian because we don't want to say where they're from. Almost exclusively, they came from one particular religion. When I posted on social media, can anybody tell me what is common across these people? Do you know what many Christian people wrote to me and said? Yeah, it's the fault of the Jews. I said, oh yeah? Why is that? Well, because it's the Jews that control the immigration policy of Britain. Really? What's the proof of that? Then they will share some NGOs that are Jewish that call for refugees welcome. Or they will put up the video of a woman, a Jewish woman, who says we need to increase immigration. But Gad Saad is also Jewish. He's not for open immigration. Stephen Miller is Jewish. He's not for open immigration. But if you just identify a single Jew who is for open immigration, that then proves that even though the immigration policy of Sweden and France and Italy and Spain and Denmark and Norway and Italy is in no way controlled by Jews. We know that, right? It's not a Jewish immigration officer that's controlling. No, but it's really the Jews that are behind it. So 3 Muhammads gang rape your daughter, it's Mordechai to blame. And it's not just the Muslims who are sending me this. It's the British Christians. They know the real enemy of the ones who raped their daughters, and it's the fucking Jews. So how do you win a war if the real culprit are the Jews? It's not the Muslim Sunnis who are eradicating the Alawites and the Christians and the Druze in Syria. Those are really Mossad agents. It's the IDF that's really doing the killing. It's really the Jews that committed October 7th. It's really the Jews that committed 9/11. How can you win a war, a civilizational war, for the freedoms and liberties of your children if the real culprits for all of these things are the Jews? There are 15 million Jews in the world. There are 2 billion Muslims. Judaism forbids the proselytizing of others. Islam's fundamental number one objective is to do that. Which one do you think poses a greater threat to your Christian identity? If you are Candace Owens and you're Christ is King, Christ, Jewish Christ, do you think that it is the Jews that are the greatest threat to your religion? How can you win a war? A war for your soul. How can you win a war when it's Gad Saad who's the biggest threat to the West? Cultures have distinct values. When people say all cultures are equal, you have no right to criticize other cultures. All religions are equal. There is good and bad in every religion. That's simply not true, right? Jains are so pacifist. They so abhor harming anything that they walk with a broom and sweep the floor that they walk on, lest they might inadvertently step on an ant. So the canons of Jainism do promote peace because the entire religion is based on not harming even an ant. Judaism forbids the eating of pork. So if you were swine, literally, if you were a pig, you'd want the world to be made up of Jews and Muslims because both religions promote the non-eating of pigs. On the other hand, Christians love prosciutto. So if you are a pig, I mean literally you are a pig, then you would be rooting for Islam and Judaism to win around the world because then you would be safe. If you had a religion that said, verily, verily, all people with colored eyes should be exterminated because this is what our God says, then if you were a blue-eyed or green-eyed person, you should be worried about such a religion. So there is nothing wrong with people saying, hey, wait a minute, I don't want this ideology to rule my nation. I escaped that ideology. Does that make me a bigot? Of course not. Does that make me a racist? Of course not. An ideology is not a race. Again, I've been repeating this for 3+ decades, and the problem is only worsening. It's only worsening because of what I discuss in the parasitic mind, because of what I discuss in suicidal empathy, which I hope you will all go out and order copies when it is available for pre-order. So why am I doing this session today? Because it's the only mechanism that I have to try to offer my small voice to this grand debate. The problem is not going to go away. The problem is only going to worsen. You have two choices. You can keep blaming the Jews, or you can wake up. You could keep blaming every culprit other than the one that is the real culprit, or you can wake up. Many Jews have now woken up only because it has come to bite their ass. But they are cowards just like the rest of the world because they only woke up when it personally affected them. Real historical figures are able to be courageous and stand on the mountain and warn others when it is unpopular to do so, when it is dangerous to do so, when it requires great personal and professional risks to do so. But wake the fuck up. The problem is not going to go away, and Gad Saad is not the enemy. Have a good day, everybody.